Hey, how is it going, everybody? My name is StevieWunderKid, and we are back at it again with another drift build here in GTA 5. This time we're doing one on the brand new Toundra Panthere, or Panther, not really sure how to say it. Some weird French name, but anyways, this was the car that was actually most recently added to GTA 5 as part of the LS Drug Wars DLC, and you can pick this car up from the Legendary Motorsports website for $2.17 million. This thing's based off the Alpine A110, which is awesome. I think the car is definitely a bit overpriced. In addition to that, another thing you'll have to keep in mind is that this car is actually only available for a limited time. You can only pick this thing up until February 22nd, which kind of sucks because you really only have a week to make up your mind as to whether or not you want to spend that much money on a car like this. In terms of performance and, usability on a track and things like that, it's not really the best. It's pretty average as a sports car, but it actually is a pretty decent drift car, and that's what I'm going to be going over in this video. So let's get right into it. I'm going to cover pretty much all of the essential stuff for the build. I really won't go over anything else. Just going to cover the performance things and all that. So first off, in the armor, for this I actually chose 100% armor. This is kind of a no-brainer because this car actually cannot be stanced either through the interaction menu or with a weapon. You can't stance this thing, so really running armor is going to make a huge difference. If anything, it's going to help you when drifting because it will be able to tolerate a little bit more damage without really affecting the handling that much. So full armor there. Next up, in the brakes, I just left the brake stock, so that way when we do use the brakes in like reverse entries, things like that, it really won't slow down the car too much. Next up, in the engine, obviously you're going to want to max this out so that way you have as much power as possible. All this stuff really doesn't matter all that much. We're going to go right down to the spoiler. Here we go. For this, I chose to leave it off. In reality, this car has the engine in the rear, so if you want to add a little bit more rear grip, then you could run the spoiler if you wanted to. After testing it with and without the spoiler, I didn't really think it was necessary, and it didn't add all that much, mainly because this car is on low grip tires. The spoiler upgrade really isn't going to be that effective, but if you find that you need a bit more rear grip and the car is spinning out way too much, you can throw it on. I just left it off. In my opinion, it doesn't really affect the handling all that much, plus it looks super clean. Any of these other spoilers I think just look really off and way too big for the car, so yeah, just leave it off there. Next up, for the suspension, for this you're going to want to leave this stock. This is one of the newer DLC cars that has the handling attribute, basically where if you add a suspension upgrade or if you lower the suspension, you'll actually add a little bit of extra traction as well. And in order to kind of keep this thing as slippery as possible and to be able to kind of make it a smooth drift car really for those longer turns and things like that, you're going to want to leave the suspension stock, so that way it's a bit easier to initiate with and also a bit easier to hold out those longer drifts without fully gripping up and falling out of the mid-drive speed boost. So suspension is stock. Next up, for the transmission, obviously max this one out because you're going to want to have this as responsive as possible, so that way it's really easy to consistently repeat that mid-drive speed boost. Next up, in the turbo section, you're going to want to throw that on. Kind of like the icing on the cake when it comes to the power upgrades, kind of a no-brainer there. Next up, we have the wheels, and for this, the wheel type doesn't really matter. I threw on some nice kind of turbofan rally style rims to kind of keep with the heritage of the Alpine A110, but the one thing that will make a difference is in tires. Obviously, we are going to put low grip tires on this build. Without it, this car is just not really that much of a drift car at all. It's very snappy and very hard to hold out pretty long drifts with, so I think low grip tires definitely are the move if you want to drift this car. So that's pretty much it in terms of upgrades. Everything else here really won't matter all that much. That's my build if you guys are interested. Just some extra skirts and things like that I added in addition to the paint scheme or roll cage and then those wheels that I just went through. But anyways, yeah, that's really it for the build. So what we're going to do now is we're going to take it outside, throw up the controller camera so you guys can see all of my inputs, and we're actually going to drift this thing and see how well it does. Alright boys, so we are on my training map now. You might recognize this from my drifting tutorials. In addition to that, if you guys want to learn more about drifting in GTA 5 and how I'm doing the maneuvers you'll see in the next couple minutes, definitely go and check out those guides. I think they're pretty helpful, and the consensus from you guys is that they've been pretty helpful as well. So yeah, anyways, let's get into drifting this thing. So hit that mid-drive. Nice. Swing it wide there. Right in that wall. Ooh. Nice. Yeah, so the thing that I noticed after drifting this car for a while is this thing has a very, very strong mid-drive speed boost. It's very peppy and torquey, which is great. If you guys have ever drifted the Pfister Growler, I know that's kind of an obscure car, not really the most well-known drift car, but that was with the tuners update, and that car actually drifts pretty well. This car feels very similar to that, although it has a little bit more body roll than the Growler does, so it's a little bit smoother actually, but it still feels the same in terms of how powerful it is and how consistent it is. As you guys can see, this thing is an absolute ripper. On flat ground like this, it's actually pretty easy to keep the car steady, which is great. In reality, on like street drifting and things like that, it is going to be a little bit more snappy. If there's elevation changes, this car, the fact that it's so small and it has a shorter wheelbase there, as you guys can see there, it is a little bit more prone to oversteer than a lot of other cars, but that doesn't mean that it's a bad drift car by any means. As you guys can see, this is just insanely consistent. If you hit that mid-drive speed boost, you'll be going for days. I definitely think though, because it's so reliant on the mid-drive speed boost to stay sideways, like here, if I don't hit it, it'll still slide for a decent amount and then it'll kind of grip up. So if you're a beginner and you're not really used to the mid-drive speed boost, then this might not be the car for you. But if you're more experienced with drifting those higher speed drift cars like the Banshee or the Rapid GT or whatever, if you know how to link together those longer slides, this thing is actually really good for that. Really just the low grips, and this thing is like sliding really wide turns, as you guys can see there. Really strong and consistent mid-drive speed boost. It's not like overly grippy or overly like torquey or anything like that, so it's very easy to keep the car in like a groove in terms of the power, which is nice. And then in terms of angle, I'll throw reverse entry so you guys can see this car doesn't hold a ton of angle. That's why you kind of the body roll kind of helps it keep it a little bit more smooth and stable, but it is a short car, so it is a little bit more prone to oversteer, as you guys can see there. A lot of other cars, maybe if it has a slightly longer wheelbase, it would have been able to hold that kind of angle, but in this context it just can't. But if you're a little bit more conservative with your angle, like I'll try here, then it will do you pretty well. There you go. Had to rely a little bit more on the brakes there, but I was able to hold out a successful reverse entry, which is good. Overall, the handling feels oddly smooth. Again, for a car like this, if it had a slightly longer wheelbase, it'd feel even better, but considering that it's so small and the engine's in the rear, it is a bit more surprising in my opinion in terms of handling. Let's throw a interesting 360 here. Let's try it. Kind of a 270 there, a little bit of a dirty one. I threw it in the wrong direction, but still, I was able to kind of hold it out. This thing, yeah, I mean, I will say that this car is just so darn expensive, and I wouldn't buy this specifically for drifting. Really, you could go without buying this car. It's not really any skin off your back, I don't think. This thing is way too expensive. It doesn't really have the best customization, and in terms of performance, it is pretty average as well, so you're not really getting anything additional over a bunch of other drift cars in the game if you buy this one, but if you choose to buy it, maybe if you're a car collector and you have access to this car and you want to try to drift it, then you definitely can. Definitely not one of the best drift cars in the game. It's very capable, but there's kind of a lot of factors against it that make it not really the best in comparison to a lot of other more well-known drift cars. But still, I mean, again, if you want to try to drift it, if you have the money for it, then it's definitely worth giving a go, because this thing is, I will say, it's pretty fun. Although, again, it's so expensive and it's kind of a FOMO kind of car. Rockstar's really pushing the FOMO marketing with this one. But anyways, yeah, this thing's pretty smooth. For pretty much any type of drifting, I feel like you can kind of get used to this thing pretty quickly. Good mid-drive, good power, good torque, decent handling as well. So yeah, not really anything super bad I can say about this thing, considering what it is, besides, of course, the cost. So with that, I think out of 10, I'll probably give this car a solid 7 out of 10. There are a lot of factors against it, as I've talked about multiple times already. Not going to repeat myself, but in addition, when you actually drive this thing, it does feel pretty good in terms of power delivery and steering angle and responsiveness there. Pretty easy to hold out a decent amount of angle with. Not the most angle in the game, but still pretty decent overall. But anyways, guys, I hope you enjoyed this little build for the brand new Toundra Panthere. Definitely a more obscure drift car. If you want to check it out, you can. But yeah, hopefully this was helpful in showing you guys everything you need to drift it and how it actually drifts. With that being said, I'm going to get back to work on some other videos. I hope you guys enjoy this one, and I will see you in the next video.